Alright, so let's talk about the uniques in Diablo 4 and kind of go over why uniques are bad, but also kind of separate them in terms of like the good uniques versus the bad uniques. So which ones are the good ones that you should actually go for and save versus the ones that you should basically kind of think about deleting. However, keep in mind some of these may get patched later down the line. So starting right off, I want to go ahead and actually explain really quick why a unique is bad or it's good, because I get asked all the time while on the live stream, yo, Slayer, I just got my first unique, and they get super excited and they'll be like, dude, is Windforce good? What builds do I play with this like new unique that I got? Like, I just got Grasp of Shadow, I just got this like crazy item, and I have to be like, well, I'm sorry, man, but the item that you got is just simply not going to be good. So let's go over Windforce for our example, because it's an OG Diablo item. Heck, it was even in Diablo 1, and it was even one of the best items in Diablo 2 for quite some time until we had rune words. But let's go over why Windforce is bad. But this does apply to all classes, okay? We're basically looking at the stats, not even going over the unique special power at the bottom, but the core main stats. We're talking about the implicit, which in this case it's the damage to distance enemies, and then the all stats, core, skill damage, damage to distant enemies, and then ranks of some sort of passive, okay? So the reason why Windforce would be bad, the first thing is it's a bow. All bows will always have damage to distance enemies, which is inferior, which means worse than the crossbow's damage to vulnerable enemies because of the way damage buckets works. I won't go too far into that, but basically there are separate damage multipliers that are going to be better to get than other ones. On top of that, vulnerability for the rogue is much easier to apply versus damage to distance enemies. It's going to be conditional on where the enemy actually is. Now, as far as all stats, it's actually not too bad. And then we have core skill damage. Core skill damage is basically what everyone uses for their skills, with the exception of maybe like a Blizzard Sorceress, right? And then we have damage to distance enemies. Again, that's kind of a bad stat. Then we have ranks to some sort of passive, okay? Most of the passives in this game will give you anywhere from 3% to maybe even 5% multiplicative damage. However, there may be some sort of a condition met, so once you get to +3, you're looking from anywhere from 9% to 15% increased damage as a multiplicative. It could be additive depending on, again, which class or which passive that you're looking at. And then we have this special power of Lucky Hit, which, to explain how Lucky Hit works really quick, because this is important, there's a lot of these items that will say on Lucky Hit you get some sort of cool thing that happens. So the reason why this one's kind of bad is because it has a Lucky Hit, and it's hit with this weapon have up to a 10 to 20% chance to deal double damage and knock back the target. And you might be thinking, well, okay, so if I get a big roll, like I get a good one, a 20% chance to do double damage, isn't that just 20%, more multiplicative damage? Not quite. The way Lucky Hit works, if we were to look at a actual skill, let's just use this one for example over here, you have to actually have the thing Lucky Hit, and then you have a chance. So let's take Penetrating Shot, for example. Penetrating Shot has a 50%. So I would take that 50% and then have to go and be like, okay, well, whatever 50% is on top of that 20%. So first off, I have to roll that Lucky Hit, which is basically half of my hits, right? And then even if I have a high 20%, it ends up actually only being a 10%. And if it was a low roll, that means it would only be a 5%. Now, not every single skill in the game will have 50%. 50% is actually quite high. There are a lot of other skills that may have a lower chance, but they'll like hit faster or whatever the case may be. But what I'm trying to say is that you have a very, very low chance to actually activate this. Even if this was 100% of the time, you actually still may lose more damage depending on your build, because remember, you have to actually hit with this weapon, and you might be running, let's say, a Twisting Blades. A lot of the weapons that say hits with this weapon do require you to have that weapon out. So let's say if you're playing a barbarian and you're using a dual build where you're using your two one-handeds, and it says like on hits with this weapon and it's your two-hander, it may not apply. Some of them, there could be some other like weird things that work, but you also have to be using this. So why is it essentially bad? So going over what a good item would have, because I went over the effects of it. So remember, with a unique item, you cannot imprint a legendary power on top of it, which would be, let's say, Twisting Blades. And it's very important on your two-hander that you have like your best one that you want, because it doubles the stats on it. So I'd be losing out on that 30% and a 60% bonus damage if I was just say use Windforce. Obviously you wouldn't use Twisting Blades with Windforce, because that wouldn't even work, because you'd have to have it out, and Twisting Blades is going to be a different category and you wouldn't have your bow out. But the other stats that you're really looking for is vulnerable damage, crit strike damage, and core skill damage. Now, This one does have the core skills, right? That's good. All sets is not that bad, but the damage to distance enemies and the other one are going to basically be bad stats compared to getting, again, your vulnerable and crit strike damage. So it's inferior in those ways, and on top of that, again, you're missing out on that power. So that's basically the brief introduction to it, but I kind of wanted to give you guys an intro to it so I can explain which ones are good, which ones are bad, and I'm going to kind of do this a little bit more rapid fire, a little bit fast, just so we have an idea of kind of why these are bad. If we could craft a legendary power on top of it, some of these would actually be okay, and it's weird that I just say okay, because some people think, well, dude, it's just a unique, it's got to be better, it's more rare. Just because something's more rare, it does not mean that it's better. So let's go over what would be considered good and bad. So starting right off, these are the Uber Uniques. Most people aren't ever going to get them. I'm just going to be realistic with you guys, at least as of season 0. Maybe in season 2, 3, season 1, they're going to have a higher drop chance, but right now, these are super, super rare. So Endaro's Visage has some sort of use with poison, so it could be actually pretty dang good, but there's a lot, of things that are unknown about these Uber Uniques, as, I would have to grab these and test these myself, and a lot of even websites don't have too much info on these in terms of like their roles, because no one has them literally. And then next up we have Doombringer, which can give you some sort of damage reduction. This could actually be an okay item because there's very few weapons that would give you some sort of power for damage reduction, but it does also give you a chance to heal for life and a 26% increase in life. So this one could actually be pretty decent. Shaco, we don't need to go over this one, but the Harlequin Crest, yeah, it's insane. It's +4 ranks. This is probably the best item in the entire game. Next up, the Melted Heart. This one could be used if you don't use any of your resource with the build. It's kind of rare, but it may see some sort of niche play. Ring of Starless Sky gives you some sort of resource reduction. It can go up to like 40%, but a lot of builds can run some sort of power that will give you a decent amount anyways. So this one would not probably be an super insane item to get. The Grandfather, it's pretty good. It gives you insane amounts of life, and on top of that, it can give you a boost to your crit strike damage, which is pretty massive. So this one may be the best in slot for a lot of builds. However, remember, you're going to be losing out on that legendary power, especially if you're playing a Necromancer and you're playing Bone Spear. It might actually not be the best in slot. Maybe for survivability, but for damage, it could actually be not even that great. Mostly for Barbarian, this would definitely be a pretty solid choice. But again, for some builds, you may not even be able to use it because it's a two-handed sword anyways. So again, these ones are niche. They're like for like the 0.0000001% of players, so it doesn't really matter too much. You're not getting these realistically. So next up, the all-class uniques. Fist of Fate, so how this works, and the thing with gloves, the most important thing is the +4 ranks to all of your skills, getting 15% attack speed, getting 12% crit. These are all phenomenally great stats. All the stats on this are very mediocre, with maybe the exception of the lucky hit immobilized on a sorceress. But if this does not roll 280 or higher, it's pretty bad, because most gloves will give you about 50+% in terms of damage. This says that your attacks randomly deal 1% to maybe 200 to 3% of their normal damage. So if you get a perfect one, you're doing 1% to 300% more damage. So at the end of the day, this thing actually is usable for some builds if you can benefit off of a build where you do not need your gloves for, let's say, that core skill, right? So that'd be like Twisting Blades, Ice Shards, Whirlwind. If you're not using that as your main source of damage, this could be actually pretty decent. Again, if it's a higher roll, 280 or higher is kind of the number. Frostburn, if you want to freeze, mostly for sorceresses, I've seen a lot of them use this, but again, you're losing +4, so maybe as a Blizzard sorceress, sure, could see some more potential, but if you're playing Ice Shards, like I was originally in that gameplay, you could consider running something else instead of Frostburns, but you ideally want that lucky hit, and I already explained how that kind of works, but you definitely have some sort of play with this on a sorceress, because you do way more damage to frozen targets, and if you're playing Ice Shards, it does have some potential here. Next up, as far as Mother's Embrace, everyone gets this. It's kind of weak because it does not have crit chance or vulnerable damage, which are kind of the stats that you want on every single piece of gear. However, the overpower is one of the most worthless stats for a lot of builds. The reason why is you cannot get overpower damage, which just starts off at 3% and you can never increase it. It's kind of like another version of crit, but like because you can't get overpower chance on a lot of the classes, it's almost worthless. So you basically, yeah, Mother Embrace, not good. Penchant Grease, finally get into something that is actually solid. I can recommend for most builds because it applies a chill, which will slow the enemy. So that will be a crowd controlled effect. So it applies a debuff to the enemy, and in addition to that, it gives you a X multiplicative damage. Probably one of the best boots in the entire game for most builds in terms of offensive. For defensive stats, you're better off looking at something else that can give you, let's say, dodge, or you can even get resource cost reduction. Obviously, you're going to always want movement speed on your boots, but it can be something where you get plus ranks to, let's say, the Frost Nova, like we would want on a sorceress, so that's why you would probably replace it on the sorceress, but it's still not a bad item at the end of the day. Next up, Razor Plate. It's kind of niche, but if you're playing any Thorn Thorns build, it's great, but if you're not playing Thorns build, oh, it's probably not going to be so good because that's all it gives you. It doesn't give you any, you're missing like 1,000 life, you're missing all the other forms of damage reduction on the chest piece. Temerity are actually pretty solid earlier on, especially if you don't have pants that roll good. It can give you a massive amount of barrier. It can apply barrier to a class that's not allowed to have barrier, which if you have an empty slot, you can get 50% X multiplicative damage on a Barbarian, which actually can be quite good. It's pretty insane for some builds to actually be able to get barrier, because if you have a barrier, you get the extra damage, and if you can keep it up most of the time, which some builds can do, like Barbarian, it can be pretty good. But if you get a really good pair of pants, let's say rolls just flat out damage reduction, you get 1,000 life, you can also put a legendary power to get more damage reduction. Yeah, you're getting an insane amount of extra damage reduction, so Temerity at the highest points of the game does fall off, but for most people, this will be a pretty solid pair of pants. Butchers, if you haven't seen my TikTok or YouTube shorts on this thing is actually insanely powerful for PvP because it's a lucky hit 100% on a crit. Most builds will average about 50% in terms of their crit strike chance. So lucky hit, depending on your skill, right? And the faster skills, you on average may have a skill 1 in 4 chance to get this proc, not on just lucky hit, but getting a crit on lucky hit. So it's about like a 20-25% chance on average when you hit the enemy that they will run away in fear. Now the reason why it's actually interesting in PvP, some of the debuffs, they don't last a full duration, but because this one's like very special, it doesn't actually get changed in the stats of 4 seconds. A lot of the crowd control actually gets changed in PvP, but this one, because it's special, it just kind of gets over the mechanic, which is interesting. But nonetheless, it's a slow, it's pretty good, and basically if you're playing anything that requires them to hold still, if you're playing, let's say, an Ice Shard Sorceress, a Hoda Barbarian, or Bone Spear, you've probably noticed in PvP you're not able to get these hits. So what you do is you use something that's going to be consistently hitting, and then you just go ahead and activate this, and it's way easier to hit them when they are moving slow and in a straight line. It's pretty OP in PvP. But other than that, it's not really super useful. Now, I'm just going to go over these a little bit more rapid fire fast because these are like the all classes ones, and now I'm just going to be like, well, it can have some sort of niche use. So this one, it does have some sort of niche use, but you have to be running Walking Arsenal, and you pretty much don't want to be running that. You want the 135x multiplier for Barbarian. So this one, maybe you can see some niche play. Ancient South, Steel Grasp getting extra, like, ranks to it. It's like very memes. Slowing them down is like not really useful either. Basically, Ancient Oath is gonna be a no for me. Battle Trance, I tried it out. I don't think you can see too much play because it is a basic skill at the end of the day to just spam with frenzies to go super fast. It's maybe super niche, but I would say probably no. Fields of Crimson, again, the stats on it are kind of meh. And when you're getting something that's not like a core skill with Barbarian especially, like it just does no damage. You can't really run Overpower or Rupture. It originally did see some play like earlier stages of the game, like Rupture was billions of damage. It doesn't work anymore. Yeah, the bleed stacking just not as powerful it used to be. So yeah, nope on that. Gore's got nerfed too hard. It's basically in the community not even cool anymore to run it. It got nerfed not only because you used to be able to get infinite damage, now it has a 100 cap. Basically, your whirlwind charges up and it gets more and more powerful, but you are losing out on crit hit chance at the end of the day. It does give you also attack speed, and I know attack speed doesn't work with whirlwind, but it still actually helps it out because you're going to use your basic attacks to kind of build up your chargers for it. But nonetheless, it also got another nerf where you can't use a shout and activate it. You basically have to stop using whirlwind. Hellhammer, no one's really using Upheaval right now. Upheaval was good, but it got nerfed. And then Overkill over here, Deathblow, I already mentioned it because it's not a core skill. You simply just don't have these like great multipliers right now in the game because of just one of the Unbridled Rage, so that key passive on Barbarian. Then we have the Rage over here. This one gives you extra cooldown. This is actually the first good Barbarian unique that I can recommend. So what does it do? Well, it makes it so there's a lucky hit when you get to reduce the cooldowns of your non-ultimate when you bleed and elite. It's actually pretty solid. Gives you your uptime on your shouts. And then we have the Magnum Opus. Your energy starts draining. It does have some potential for some really weird builds to do an insane amount of damage to screenshot, and then you're gonna put it on a YouTube thumbnail for like clickbait for like very specific things. But that's really about it, because you can do an insane amount of damage, but you just start draining your fury. Maybe for some niche things, it does have some potential, though. So I won't sign this out as completely worthless like a lot of these. So pretty much it just comes down to, for most people, okay, Rage is like the only good one, the armor piece. As far as the Druid goes, Druid, you know what's weird is Druid, all of them are actually kind of viable. You actually have some pretty cool niche things that you can do with every single one of these. You can do the Claw build with Druid, although it's like arguably not as good as the Wax and Gibbous, which has gotten super popular. You can hit for like 1 billion damage. I'm not even trolling with with this thing. It's pretty crazy. And then we have this where your other skills now become these other skills, and it has a lot of potential. Tempest Roar is pretty much like the go-to, like, goated one. This is the one that everyone is searching for. But like, yeah, it's pretty solid because it makes it so your base storm skills are werewolf skills, and it really helps out. And then like the wolf companions are infused, dealing some damage. Yeah, I know I'm gonna say this one might be the only one that seems kind of meh. And then making it so werewolf is your true form, and you get +2 ranks, and then on top of this, getting 2 ranks to all your werebear skills. Just for certain, again, unique builds, they have some potential. This one might be another one where it's kind of like where it makes it so your things have no cooldown on, where is it? Your next non-ultimate werebear skill costs no resource. Druid actually has a really good key passive for resource, but I don't know. I think most of the Druid ones are actually pretty solid. As far as Necromancer goes, Ring of Metalin is actually pretty solid. Makes it so your minions do an insane amount of damage, but it's like a chance unlucky hit. So yeah, not the easiest thing to proc. But then also Deathless Visage is pretty solid because it makes it so Bone Spear, because basically you're only playing Bone Spear. I think this one's kind of cool. The Death Speaker's Pendant makes it so all your minions cast a mini little Blood Nova when you do it. I like it. It's kind of cool, but for the most part, most people will consider most of the uniques on Necromancer to be bad, except for this one. But again, this one I think has a niche use, and I think this one has a niche use as well. As far as the rogues go, there's some people that like Combination because it's for like the combo generator. You guys already know how I feel about that. I always think it's terrible to use a generator, especially late game, unless you're doing something where, like, again, you're trying to screenshot so you can print it out and put it on the refrigerator and show your mom. So you do penetrating shot, you hit for 1,000,000 damage, while Necromancer hits for 1,000,000 damage every single second. And this, you have to build it up. You got to build the combo points up. It's not the worst. It's probably one of the better ones, but most of these are kind of bad. Cowl of the Nameless does give you an insane amount of lucky hit chance against crowd controlled enemies. So if you're running maybe a niche build actually going into season 1, there could be some sort of like legendary, like a heart gem that actually makes this one of the best uniques in the game, no troll. So yeah, keep your eye on this one for next season, but right now it was kind of meh. Getting extra attack speed, yeah, most of it, again, getting things like basic skill damage is almost worthless, right, for most people's builds, so that's why most of these are kind of bad. Eyes in the Dark, I complain about these. I think these are memes. It should be the other way around. It should be like they just activate infinitely, or just disable. You know what? We're making a video that goes over how to fix all these uniques, because these are terrible. The Grasp Shadow, it sounds cool, right? You get a Shadow Clone every single time you use an attack with lucky hit. Oh, awesome. No, it's not awesome. It's very, very, very bad. It doesn't even get your aspect. So like the Twisting Blades, no, they don't even get that. So it's terrible. Sky Hunter, you're gonna have like 80% crit on most rogue builds anyways, but this one does guarantee one. Then you get some extra energy. But again, the problem is it's a bow. You have your marksman skill versus like vulnerable, and you do have crit strike damage on it, but then you have exploit passive over there as well. It's like, this one's not super terrible, but it's just because it's a bow. Unfortunately, because it's a bow, it's bad. And remember, you're losing out on your legendary aspect that would be on your two-handed, which in most cases, whatever, you know, range build you're playing, rapid fire, barrage, like those all have powers that you'd want to put on the two-hand. Already talked about Unforce. It's terrible, sadly. I want it to be good. If it knocked back and had double damage every single time, then it would be really good. Maybe if it said, like, instead of lucky hit, it's just hits with his weapon have double damage and knockback, then yeah, it'd actually be pretty good. But because it's a chance, it's just terrible. Word of Hakan over here, the Rain of Arrow, like, you're losing out on cooldown reduction, you're losing out on movement speed, resource cost reduction, you're losing out on the best slot, and then your amulet has a 50% bonus when you imprint on it. Terrible. It's if maybe it said your Rain of Arrows had no cooldown, then oh man, that'd be sweet. Or every time you activate an imbuement, Rain of Arrows is casted. Sure, then we're looking at something good. But you have your ultimate that still can't do that much damage compared to like a core skill. It's bad. It's bad. We don't even need to go over it. Okay, so we're finally here with the sorcerers. Which sorcerers ones are good, right? Esodoras, as far as Crackling Energy, most of them are pretty bad. They did recently buff Crackling Energy's damage, but I have not seen any build that makes this look super OP. But this one may have some potential later down the line if they just buff it. Esu's Heirloom, again, you're losing out on Ice Nova, and that is in every single sorceress build for the most part, because you need it. And then your crit, because you need vulnerability, really. This one has some potential though. I'm not gonna sign this one out as useless. I have not even seen one person make a Incinerate build. This one, do I think it has any use? Probably not, because it's Incinerate, and again, you have kind of mess stats on it. Where's the vulnerable damage? Where's the crit damage? Again, I would just repeat myself again. It doesn't have the good stats that you want on the item, and then on top of that, it's Incinerate. Again, I have not even seen one person make a build on it. You know what? Maybe we'll be the first on YouTube, you know, to make a build on this, and I'll let you guys know how it goes, but probably it's going to be bad. And then Gloves Illuminator. So this is so weird about the uniques in this game. So Fireball bounces each time as it travels, exploding every single time it bounces. It sounds cool, right? And then it's like, oh, but it does like less damage. What do you mean less damage? I got this super cool item and it bounces, and then I do less damage. How about it bounces and gains more damage? That would be a unique, not something where it's bad, and on top of that, it does have fireball attack speed, so maybe it's like, okay. But it does have a chance to stun, but again, it's on lucky hit. If it was fireball stuns 100% of the time, then this would actually be pretty good. But like, there's just so many weird things with the design of these uniques. Honestly, a lot of these uniques, they have been buffing them, and they need a huge complete rework. I'm actually going to be working on a video, and I'm going to actually send it to them as a partner. I have some connections, and I really want them to buff all of these uniques. These uniques on almost all the classes, and I'm going to make a dedicated video on most of the uniques, and I'm going to go over why, you know, we should change them, and to make them actually good, I'm going to basically do a lot of homework on it. Okay, so finally we're getting to something actually usable. Ice Heart Boreas, so that means when, you guys might have seen it in the gameplay, I think I had it equipped, but enemies that die while they're frozen have a chance to lose Nova. It's pretty satisfying, but you have damage to frozen, which means, like, unless the boss is staggered, yeah, no good. And then injured, no good. And then freeze duration is actually not bad of a stat. But again, you're missing out on 1,000 life, 20% damage reduction to, like, close enemies or distance, flat armor. There's, like, so many things are better. Ryman is actually pretty good, but there's a downside with it. So after you use teleport, you get to stun everything, and it sucks everything in. It's kind of cool, right? But then teleport's cooldown is increased. What should happen is, you know, it gives you more uptime on teleport. Basically, I want teleport cooldown reduction, not increase. I want it decreased. Why would you get a legendary power and make something longer? Like, you know, it's a unique, it's a very rare item. And then endless rage for every third cast of fireball, you launch another one. Again, all the stats. Core skill is okay. Close is like, it's okay, but it's not like insane. And then the chance to slow, while it's good, it's not just stun. You'd rather have stun, and inner flames, like, whatever. And then every third cast of it, launching the 2 additional projectiles. So again, you're missing out on vulnerable and crit, so that basically makes it so whatever legendary power, again, you'd be losing out on your legendary power for your 2-hander anyways, so it's terrible in that aspect. And then the Staff of Lam Essen, the charge bolts pierce, but they deal less damage. You should be piercing and doing more damage, right? Again, we have lightning damage, close, injured, primary to restore resource. Like, where's the crit? Again, same thing for all of them. That I've already mentioned and why these are bad. So I know these items are kind of bad, and it sucks that as of right now that there's very few ones that are good, but there are ones that are good, right? Like I mentioned before, you know, I went over the good and the bad ones, and I kind of explained it. I don't want to make this video too long, but I will hopefully be able to update you guys very soon on, like, well, I'm going to make a video going over how to actually fix these, and I'm going to send it to Blizzard, and I'm going to hopefully get some of these addressed, because they have been buffing them, but I think that they're not in the right direction as far as it goes. But anyways, that's my thoughts on the uniques. I would love to know how you guys feel about this. You guys think that this game should have a bunch of these unique items, and a lot of them being pretty terrible, with the exception of, like, the super uber ones that, like, to get these, you would have a better chance at finding a winning lottery ticket in the trash can 2 times in a row than to get one of these Shakos to drop. Do you guys think that, like, you know, we should have all these uniques in the game that are bad? I think every single one of these should be at least slightly usable, considering, one, how rare they are, and, like, what's the point of these items to, like, drop and have a special beam and, like, have a special, like, you know, they got, like, a paragraph on a story on them, and then, like, they're just, like, not good, right? These should be the not necessarily, I'm not asking for every single one of these to be the best in the game, but at least a viable build with them to at least kind of keep up with the meta. Anyways, ranted long enough. Thanks for watching, guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here and you want to see more, subscribe to the bell. I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.